Hi guys, so today we're going to be looking at the digestive system anatomy, part 2. This time it is the stomach. Let's get into it. So, a little bit to know about the stomach is it actually lies between the esophagus and duodenum itself, and it's anterior to the aorta and pancreas, but posterior, or not posterior, medial to the spleen itself. So we all know that whenever we eat food, it's gonna get broken down by hydrochloric acid. But do you know how is hydrochloric acid actually produced in our stomach? Well, we're gonna take through the process of how hydrochloric is produced, and the different stages of it. So the first thing to know is actually the stomach performs actually mechanical digestion through peristalsis itself, which is the involuntary movement of food, right? Through either the stomach, the esophagus, the large intestine, and the small intestine as well. Okay, and what happens is that it's actually going to churn the food into mixing it with gastric secretions and form chyme itself. So we're gonna get to the part where how hydrochloric acid is actually formed. So first, the goblet cells. So those goblet cells are actually going to secrete mucus. And what happens is that they're actually going to secrete mucus, protecting the stomach lining from the acid itself. So the goblet cells, like I said, are going to produce mucus, which are going to protect the outer lining of the stomach itself. So that's why hydrochloric acid doesn't like directly burn through our stomach itself, because the goblet cells actually produce a or secrete a mucus to protect the lining of the stomach from the acid itself. And then the next cells is the parietal cells. So those parietal cells are actually going to produce hydrochloric acid and strengthen factors for vitamin B12 absorption as well. So those parietal cells are going to produce hydrochloric acid and strengthen factors for the absorption of vitamin B12. And the last cells is actually called the chief cells. So those chief cells are actually going to produce peptiogen. So those peptiogen, right, which is actually going to be converted into hydrochloric acid into pepsin itself. Now the pepsin inside has the enzyme called protease, which is where protein will be broken down into amino acids itself. So you can see the process of here, the goblet cells produce mucus, protecting the parietal cells, producing hydrochloric acid and strength factors for the absorption of vitamin B12. And you have the chief cells, which are going to produce pepsinogen, which will be converted into hydrochloric acid to form pepsin, and pepsin consists of the enzyme called protease. Now, going through the different regions of the stomach. So the stomach actually has four main regions itself. So first is the cardia. So the reason why it's actually called the cardia is actually because the diaphragm is above the stomach itself, and the heart lays above the area. So you can see the esophagus. I probably think the esophagus is right behind or uh, in front of the stomach itself. That's why it's named the cardia. And you can see the cardia sphincter down here, followed by the fundus. So the fundus is actually where gas is commonly collected from. So where gas buildup will form. The body of the stomach down here, the greater curvature, which is the yellow outer line I've underlined, and you have the lesser curvature, followed by the pylorus, and you have the pylorial sphincter with the duodenum itself. So this is a pretty easy diagram. So it's just identifying them. So um now we actually come to the lesser momentum and the greater momentum. So what are momentums? Momentums, or I'm going to first talk about the lesser momentum. So the lesser momentum is a double wall layer of the visceral peritoneum that extends from the lesser curvature of just now we said of the stomach and the first part of the duodenum across the liver itself. So it kind of inserts itself at the gallbladder and the lower part of the liver itself. And for the greater momentum, right, it is a large fourth layer fold of the visceral peritoneum that is going to extend from the greater curvature of the stomach all the way drooping down into the transverse colon itself of the small intestine. So example, you're like wearing an apron. The first upper portion of the apron will be hang from your neck, right? That will be your greater curvature, and the apron is gonna droop down all the way down to the your body and cover the proportion of it, right? Those are kind of like your greater momentum coming from the greater curvature down to the transverse column of the small intestine. So overall function of the momentums itself, right, is actually to help cushion the abdomen organs and limit the spread of infection too. Now, the gastric region is a fold of the mucosa. You can go and watch the previous video to know about more about the mucosa, but the mucosa, right, is actually the folds of the stomach itself. What happens is that they're actually going to allow the stomach to actually expand. So when it expands, it actually increases its capacity of food. So if, for example, you're like at a buffet, you're just stuffing food down. Those gastric ruga, right, are going to expand. The folds of the mucosa are actually going to expand, increasing the capacity of the stomach. And when the stomach capacity actually increases, it also increases the surface area, allowing for more digestion and more secretion of absorption of nutrients. And that is it for the for the stomach. So I hope you have enjoyed this video. So if you have not watched the first part of the video, I highly recommend you to go and check it out. And I hope you have learned a lot from this video. Thank you, and I'll see you next time. Peace.